Good morning, Chairwoman Luna, Ranking Member, Ms. Crockett, and members of the task force. And Dina Titus, I just knew we were going to get you involved in this topic at one point. Great to see you here. I'm George Knapp, Chief Investigative Reporter at KLAS TV in Las Vegas. I began my pursuit of this weird mystery way back in 1987, and for 38 years, I've always approached this as a news story. It's not a matter of faith or belief. To me, it's a story, and it's an important one. I'm proud to be here alongside these witnesses today, men who have seen strange things and stepped forward to tell the world about it. Whistleblowers and witnesses who step up are routinely insulted, belittled, or worse. They risk their reputations, their careers, their clearances, their livelihoods, and sometimes much worse than that, even their freedom. I know that one of the goals of the task force here is to figure out ways to protect whistleblowers and witnesses, and it's a tall order because so many of the things that happen to witnesses like these are extra legal. They're carried out by persons unknown, as Mr. Dave Grush, sitting up at the top of the room, knows all too well, including events in recent days that have happened to him. I want to share a couple of things that I've learned along the way on this long journey, and I submitted most of that in written form because I estimate that my statement here today would take about 4.5 hours. So I'm going to try to jump over and touch on the more important salient points. I submitted the detailed written statement for the record, and we'll go into a lot of that here. But the public has been told over and over since the late 40s, there's nothing to worry about here. These mysterious craft seen by millions of people in the skies, in the oceans, over the land are not real. They're not a threat. The witnesses are wrong. They're crackpots. Don't believe it. That changed for me. What got me hooked is the paper trail. Documents that were squeezed out of the U.S. government after the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, became the law of the land. And those documents paint a much different picture than what the public, the press, and Congress have been told over many years. The documents from military and intelligence personnel behind closed doors admit that, quote, these things are real. They're not fictitious. They can fly in formation. They're evasive, and they outperform any aircraft known to exist, including ours. The public, of course, as I said, has been told something much different. Back in 1989, I reported about a guy named Bob Lazar, who claimed that he worked at a facility dubbed S4 out in the Nevada desert, very near to Area 51. He said he was part of a reverse engineering program. He said there are alien craft that will be taken apart to figure out how they operated out there, and that was a pretty tall order. I had clearly taken a dive into the deep end of the pool there. But in the years since then, I've interviewed dozens of other people, and I've detailed what their testimony has been in the written statement. They include Senator Harry Reid, Senator Howard Cannon, also of Nevada, a guy named Al O'Donnell, who was the first general manager of EG&G in Nevada, which managed the Nevada test site, which blew up hundreds of nuclear weapons. There's a guy named Dr. James Lakatsky, who was a career scientist with the Defense Intelligence Agency, who was the guy who initiated a program called AAWSAP, Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Application Program, which is, as far as we know, the largest acknowledged UFO program ever funded by the U.S. government, which put together an amazing pile of information that members of this committee and the world, most of which have never seen. The DIA still hasn't released 95% of what was prepared by that program at a cost of millions and millions of dollars. The one name I do want to bring up in this session, though, is Robert Bigelow. So looking into the idea of crash retrievals and reverse engineering, while AAWSAP, that program, was active, the DIA's contractor, Robert Bigelow of Las Vegas, made a bold attempt to acquire physical proof of UFO crashes. It's been widely reported and suspected that Lockheed Martin is one of the contractors, the defense contractors, that has held this stuff, stored it away in secrecy, and tried to figure out how it works. I have confirmed on the record that Robert Bigelow and a trusted colleague from AAWSAP met with and negotiated with senior executives at Lockheed Martin and hammered out a deal wherein Bigelow's company, Bass, would receive a quantity of unusual material that had been stashed away and protected at a facility in California. That material was not made here. I want to move on now to the Russia files, because that was going to be sort of the central impetus of what I was going to talk to you about today. Back in the early 90s, I got into Russia, met with a number of their defense officials, Ministry of Defense and others who confirmed for me that Russia had been doing the same thing that the United States had been doing, that is, secretly studying UFOs while publicly saying something completely different. The documents and interviews that I obtained and have now shared with this task force show that the USSR launched what is almost certainly the largest UFO UAP investigation in the world. The first phase of that was an order was sent out to the entire USSR military empire that every unit, you see anything strange in the sky, a craft, an orb, something unusual, you had to gather all the evidence, collect testimony from the witnesses, look for physical evidence, and all of that information went into one program at the Ministry of Defense. Thousands and thousands of these reports came in. A lot of them were first routed to the KGB, but then back to another program that came after this collection effort called Thread 3. And Thread 3 was an analysis program. We have provided to the committee the documents of what they were trying to do, and essentially they were trying to build their own UFOs. They were using the information from their observations and studies to try to figure out that technology. The guy who was in charge of that program, Colonel Boris Sokolov, told me that their goal was to basically develop technology that would be superior to anything we had, based on what they learned from UFOs.
So, Mr. Knapp, we were definitely going to watch every documentary. You guys have done you and Jeremy have done a terrific job. I usually have more questions than I have answers. I think we all do, and you guys are doing a terrific job to bring information to the public. Do you think that any of this is a psyop by the U.S. government?
Entirely possible. I mean, our government and other governments have admitted that they've tried to use UFOs to cover secret projects. But I think they also do some reverse engineering of those claims. So years after people start seeing UFOs over Area 51, for example, they come up with the story, oh yeah, that was, we planted that story. So I read in a major newspaper just a couple of weeks ago, they planted this story. An Air Force colonel went out into the desert, went to a bar at Rachel and gave them some fake UFO photos. And that's how the whole story about Area 51 started, which is preposterous.
My first question is, Mr. Knapp, I recently introduced the UAP Whistleblower Protection Act to help provide whistleblower protection to federal personnel for disclosing the use of federal taxpayer funds to investigate UFOs. I still don't want to say UAPs. How can Congress further increase whistleblower protections?
I think you got to unleash the dogs and go track down the money and where it goes, because a lot of this stuff has been moved out of government.
Sure.
As you know, Rep. Burchett, it's been given to private contractors who've stashed it away. They've had it for so long that there's nobody left inside government, or very few, who know where it is.
And they do that to keep us from FOIA, correct?
Yeah, it's to keep it from FOIA. And I think that the contractors who've had this stuff for a very long time set their own standards about who is allowed to know what. And it's a very small group that ever cracks that. I think Representative Luna has been looking at the use of classifications to hide things. I'm not sure that even this committee getting security clearances that should allow you to see this stuff would allow you to follow where it really goes.
I worry about the people that are looking at it and don't even know what they're looking at. I mean, it's gone through so many, since Roswell, for instance. I mean, you think there's nobody even alive that was around any of that stuff.
Yeah,
so
I don't think they've made much progress from the people that I've talked to. I don't think they've made much progress in learning that technology. Might have made some, but you wonder, the implication is tic-tac. Oh, yeah, that's ours. What flew over Washington, D.C. in '52, is that ours too? When are you going to break that out? You guys authorized tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars on weapon systems that can't do half of what we've seen UFOs do. So when do they break this out? If it's really a classified project, could change the world. I don't think they've made much progress, and I think they've been lying to us and to you and the rest of the world, and they're still doing it.
Yes, sir, I agree with you. How did you manage to obtain the classified Russian UAP documents, and how did you get them back in the United States?
Well, I met this Russian physicist who was in the United States lecturing.
And I want to clarify that. I can't even take a thing of honey home on my airplane
Yeah.
when I fly back to Tennessee.
Yeah,
So,
I did something pretty dumb.
and I'm
if they-
bitter about it, but go ahead.
I did something kind of dumb. I met with these officials who, during that time period, glasnost, perestroika, the Russians were trying to open up to the world, and I saw it as a window of opportunity, and it was. And we were able to talk these folks into providing us information that otherwise we would never have seen. Some of that was classified. I found out that they only stamped the top pages of these documents that were classified, so I just removed them. I removed those pages, and I carried them out. And if they'd caught me, I'd be in a gulag still.
Yeah. We'd be saying, what happened to George Knapp? Oh, yeah. What happened to the Russians that came forward to you in 1993, and were there any repercussions for them?
Well, there were. The first thing that happened when I talked about this after getting back and going through the files and things and sifting through it, the Russian physicist who had helped us introduced all these people wrote back and said there was a huge eruption, that there was the real right, far autocratic forces that wanted a return of the USSR had really go after these guys. They described them as traitors. Nikolai Kapranov, the physicist friend of mine, said, look, if this had happened 5 years earlier, we would be in prison. If it had happened 10 years earlier, we would have been shot. Right. Luckily, at that point, Putin was not in power, but none of those people that we talked to on that trip in 1993 would ever talk to me again. I went back in 1996, and it was like I had the plague. I spoke to different people, but they were scared. And eventually, the story was spun where the Ministry of Defense officials who gave us this information were described as ufologists who said there was nothing really significant to these files. They didn't really find anything a big deal. And I can tell you, you'll see those files that I shared with you, they did find stuff. There was an incident in October of 1982 over an ICBM base where UFOs popped up, was observed over this base where the missiles are pointed at us, United States. These UFOs perform incredible maneuvers. They split apart, they fuse back together, they'd appear and disappear. And right at the end of this 4-hour period, the launch control codes for the ICBMs lit up. Something entered the correct codes. The missiles were fired up and ready to launch, and they could not shut it down. The Russian officers were panicking. The UFOs they disappeared. The launch control system goes back to normal. Colonel Sokolov and his team came in, took the thing apart, could not figure out what it was. It wasn't a power surge or EMPs or some of the baloney excuses that our country has given for similar events involving our nuclear missiles. They thought it was a message from wherever the UFOs were from. And that's a chilling thing. I mean, we were a couple of seconds away from World War III starting, and the UFOs were responsible for it.
All right, I'm out of time, but real quick, who are the contractors that have this material, the corporations?
Well, one of them is Lockheed. And I'll tell you, I mean, I'm not saying Lockheed's the bad guys. They're doing what they were asked to do. Sure. They have lied about this because that's what they're supposed to do. But Lockheed would be one. There's a list I can give you, Congressman. Some of the big ones, the usual suspects.
Okay, thank you.
This is when it zoomed out, so you can still see it traveling. Mr. Knapp, have you heard about events like this occurring? And what information might you have?
I have heard about events like this. I have heard about this event. Jeremy Corbell and I talked about it in one of our episodes a while back. We did not have the video, though. There are servers where there's a whole bank of these kind of videos that Congress has not been allowed to see, that the public hasn't been allowed to see. Occasionally, some of that stuff gets out in the wild, and it comes our way. It should be going to you. The public should be seeing this stuff. And why you're not allowed to, I don't know. But that's a Hellfire missile smacking into that UFO and just bounced right off. And it kept going.
It kept going, and it looks like the debris was taken with it.
Yeah. What the hell is that? What flies like that?
Again, I'm not going to speculate what it is, but the question is, why are we being blocked from this information consistently? I want to ask this just question. How in the world, this is the document, I want to enter this in for the record if it hasn't already been entered, Madam Chair. The document that you provided on thread 3, this is a huge file. How in the world did you smuggle this out of Russia?
carefully.
In your socks?
I don't think I want to be really specific about it because I might have to go back there and get some more sometime. Although, no, that'd be crazy to do that. Well, I took the top pages off that were stamped with the security signature, and I carried them out on my person. But the rest of them I just threw in my suitcase and threw some caviar in there as a distraction as well, and hoped for the best. Otherwise, I'd be a citizen of Siberia right now.
And you had you reported James Lakatsky came to you with government possession of NHI craft and how they ultimately gained entry. Can you testify to the veracity of that claim?
Dr. Lakatsky is an honorable man who served most of his career with the DIA, a very trusted, high-level rocket scientist and intelligence analyst who inspired the OSAP program, as I said earlier. And in full disclosure, I've co-written 2 books with him. He dropped this on myself and our other co-author out of the blue. And it took 14 months for us to get DOPSR approval for him to release 2 sentences on that. He said this craft, we had managed to get inside of it. It had no wings, no rotor, no tail. It had no fuel tanks. They didn't know how it flew or how it was operated. It clearly looked like it was aerodynamic, but he would not go further. He's a by-the-book guy, and until he gets clearance to say more about that, I don't think we're going to hear much more. But it's not ours. It wasn't ours. We didn't make it. We didn't know who made it and how it was built and how it operated. We've got at least one, and I don't know. I think that's enough confirmation that we do have recovered
Leslie,
discs and material.
Were you guys scared or hesitant to come forward and tell your story because of fear and believing that you might be reprimanded or ostracized from society because of your stories? Mr. Knapp, I've watched many of your videos on Joe Rogan and other places. One of the big questions, I think, for many of us is why do you believe that the federal government refuses to be transparent about this issue?
I think there's probably multiple reasons. At the start, when these things first started invading our skies in large numbers, we were scared. It was right after World War II, and we didn't know what they were, and they didn't want to panic the public, and that was probably a good call. Over time, I think the lying sort of became institutionalized, you know. Flights over Washington, D.C. in 1952, they're seen, they're captured on radar, jets are chased after these objects, and then we get an explanation it was a temperature inversion. And those kind of lies have been told for a long time. What was told to me by an investigator from Congress, a guy named Richard D'Amato, who was sent after this story by Robert Byrd and Harry Reid. He came out to Nevada, tried to get into Area 51, did get in there, looked around, talked to people, trying to get to the bottom of it. He believed that this program, reverse engineering, et cetera, was inside, had been moved inside these corporations. And he said, when this comes out, people are going to go to prison. And he meant people who were basically misusing legitimate national security funds, tens of billions of dollars, in order to keep this cover-up going. I also believe there's a legitimate reason for the cover-up in that there is undeniable connection of national security involved in this technology. If we are racing for it to master that technology against the Russians and the Chinese, which is what I have been told by Senator Reid and many others, then it is a race that's critical to our survival. There could be a form of disclosure, I think. Yes, it's real, it's from somewhere else, without revealing all the details that would allow someone else to have an advantage in the race for this technology.
Mr. Knapp, how do we know that the files that you obtained from the former Soviet government are not BS and just given to you as a disinformation campaign against the U.S. government?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I shared some of them with the Senate Intelligence Committee when I first got back because that was requested by the Russians who shared some of that information with me. Secondly, I gave all of that material to the DIA through BASS, the OSAP program, sorry for the acronyms.
Can you name names real quick? Sorry.
At BASS or OSAP?
Who did you give them to directly?
I gave them to Robert Bigelow and to Jim Lakatsky. And they hired a whole team to go through them and retranslate them and analyze it, and they created a structure of how the UFO programs in the USSR and Russia were put together. They said they were real. The other person who said they were real is David Grush.
The other bill, the UAP Disclosure Act, which was filed last year, Senator Schumer, who I cannot believe that there's a topic that he and I agree on, but he and I agree on this topic. He has sponsored it in the Senate. He put it on the National Defense Authorization Act last year. Remarkably, I can't get it it was stripped out by the House last year, and I can't get it onto the bill leaving the House this year. Mr. Knapp, how far would that bill go to actually getting the answers that we need?
Pretty far. I think that they're still going to have roadblocks. You know, the keepers of the secrets, the private companies that have been doing this job for intelligence agencies for a long time, are not going to cough it up. You'd have to force it out of them. And whether you can get them to admit that they have it or not, I mean, they're supposed to lie about it. They've been lying about it. You know, more power to you. I hope it works. I hope it passes this time. But it's a daunting challenge to get them to open up after lying about it for more than 75 years.
You've interviewed numerous UAP whistleblowers over the years. The question is, how do you verify their claims before deciding they're credible enough to report on?
It's a combination of factors. First, you check their credentials. Did they really serve where they said they did, and did they work where they said they did? Are there any other witnesses? Is there visual proof, film, footage, things of that sort? You ask the people around them that know them, that used to work with them, if they're credible people. That's one way. You know, I think about Arrow, the organization that this body created to deal with witnesses and whistleblowers. I hope I'm not taking too much of your time here, but they invited people to come forward, service members who saw things and had experiences. And I can tell you that the people that I have talked to who went through that are deeply disappointed. There was a guy named Bob Jacobs who was a lieutenant attached to Vandenberg in 1964. His unit would record missile tests. They recorded all of them. On one of these particular tests, a UFO comes out of nowhere, zaps what looks like a laser beam at what would have been a nuclear dummy, a nuclear weapon, and disabled it. And he is called into the commander's office. Two guys in suits clip that film footage out that shows the UFO, and he's ordered to never talk about it. He comes forward to Arrow. He heeds the call, thinking he's doing his duty as an American to tell that story, and they completely dismissed him. They made up a story that they had tracked down the original footage, and there was nothing like that in it. Well, there was no original footage. It had been taken away the day the footage was recorded. He's deeply disappointed. People like Bob Salas, who had worked at a nuclear ICBM base, who saw UFOs flying over the base, and these missile silos were taken down. He went to Arrow, too, and was completely disregarded. It almost looks like Arrow operated as a counterintelligence operation to get people to come in, tell their stories, and then discredit all of them. I can't imagine that any whistleblower or witness will ever go to Arrow again because of what happened under the first director, who's now long gone, but still seems to act as the spokesperson for that organization.
And I would say, Madam Chair, maybe at some point we need to really dig deep into Arrow, and I would encourage us.
Oh, I'd be happy to send maybe a subpoena to Mr. Kilpatrick.
That'd be fun.
What is the estimated annual budget, your view, for the program for investigating or reverse engineering UAP-related technology, including official, misappropriated, or black budget funds?
I wouldn't have a clue. I don't know of any person that's ever seen it.
Does anyone on this panel wish to address that question? Okay, moving on. Are any of you willing to name specific gatekeepers within the root cell of the UAP-SAP Federation?
You mean specific people and contractors that have dealt with this and kept the secret?
Specific individuals.
Well, one of them was named Dr. James Ryder at Lockheed. But, you know, again, to emphasize, I don't fault these contractors for doing what they were asked to do by our government. They're supposed to lie if people ask about it. And the intelligence agencies who gave this stuff to them, CIA, I think primarily, told them to keep it quiet. And they've done that. And I suspect that they'd like an off-ramp, that they'd like some help with figuring out this technology at some point. I have a name for you.
Go ahead.
Glenn Gaffney. CIA.
Glenn Gaffney, CIA. Another question for you, Mr. Knapp. What is, in your view, having investigated this issue for so many years, what is the long game with respect to disclosure of this information to the public? Because with the advent of essentially a video camera and a high megapixel phone in everybody's pocket, at some point, this information is going to be impossible to withhold from the public. What do you think is the long game here?
Well, the secret's out. I mean, how many videos have there been already? You know, videos that are leaked from within the military and intelligence agencies and contractors and censor platforms. It's out there. But they have the high ground. The people that don't want us to take it seriously dismiss it, discredit the witnesses, come up with a cover story. I mean, it's been out there a long time. The public senses that it's real, and the people in authority dismiss them. It's a game that's been going on a long time, and I don't think they're ever going to release it. I think that there's an attitude among the people that have been involved in this for a long time that the public doesn't deserve to know, and that the public probably can't handle it, but they can.
Describe your understanding of the org chart or lines of control within the executive branch with respect to these topics.
I think these programs are in the executive branch, National Security Council, and over on that side. That seems to be what some of our witnesses have told us over the years. So you can, Congress can file all kinds of requests. The FOIAs can be filed with the Department of Defense, Department of War now, and they can honestly say, well, we don't have it, because they don't have it.
Thank you. Is there anything in my remaining 30 seconds that you'd like to share on any of these questions that I've asked you today?
I applaud the committee for trying to tackle this monster of an issue. I really appreciate that it might be the only bipartisan issue in Washington where everybody can agree. We've watched multiple hearings now. Everyone is asking the same kind of questions, whether right or left, and honestly want the answers. And Chairman Luna, Chairwoman Luna, I appreciate your dedication to this, Tim Burchett and the other members, for sticking with it, because it's come up in Congress before, and they had hearings, and then they dropped it for 50 years. So it's going to take a lot of time to get to the bottom of this, and I applaud your commitment to getting to the truth.
How much of these alleged Russian crash retrieval documents have already been physically out there? So, I mean, percentage-wise of the documents that you submitted to Congress, what was public already and what was not newly released?
Maybe 1%.
Okay, so the rest of it should be predominantly new information.
Yep.
Also, can you just elaborate real quick? I know you had, I think, mentioned a Thread 3 program, but also alleged in those documents, I got through maybe half of them last night. There's a lot, and I don't speak Russian, contrary to what my people might allege. What does the Thread 3, was there any specific programs that existed within the Soviet government or groups to specifically investigate this by name real quick?
It's a number. There's a number in those documents I gave you. There was a larger program that actually had 3 sub-programs that was, Thread 3 was the name I got, and then the DIA guys who looked at it figured out there was a much larger organization.
And it's listed in those documents?
Yes.
Okay, while this is still rolling, Mr. Nusatelli, real quick yes or no answers. Are you aware of anything in the government, United States government arsenal that can split a Hellfire missile like this? Does this video scare you guys? Nat?
I had a different reaction. I was really happy that it got out. Thanks for providing that.
Curiosity kills the
Congressman.
cat.
Mr. Knapp, in your testimony and in this document, you detail an event that happened in Russia where their nuclear missiles were activated, and we were close to a World War III at that time, which is startling to hear. It's also good to know that as we have investigated the JFK files as well, that we're learning that that there was a document that was sent between Russia, there was an agreement between Russia and the United States that if they were to see some unidentified objects over sensitive sites, that they would report it to each other. Are you familiar with that document?
Yes, I'm also familiar with the rhetoric, public rhetoric between President Reagan and Gorbachev at the time, too, that they traded statements about, wouldn't it be something if we were threatened by something from way outside, how we might work together. I know for sure that they had conversations about it, and I know we did reach an agreement to try to lessen the possibility that us detecting a UFO or group of UFOs would not be mistaken for a bunch of Russian missiles. There were exchanges of that sort that went back and forth.
Yeah, and I can imagine this is, to me, the validity of this document is underscored by the fact that Russia would not want this to be known. They absolutely would not want to know, the public to know, or the United States to know, that there was a vulnerability in their missile systems. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And, and we had many similar incidents at our nuclear weapons facilities here that have all been sort of swept under the rug, but it's pretty scary when you take down 10 missile silos during tense times, and you don't have a better explanation for it than it was a special test of security mechanisms or using EMPs, which is a preposterous explanation.
And I think this latest video from Mr. Burleson is something that should get everyone pause. When you see the 3 orbs that drop, was that in a defensive posture or was that in an offensive posture? And what capabilities did those orbs have that we, quite frankly, may not have? Mr. Knapp?
As I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks, what hooked me on the story was the paper trail, these documents that shouldn't exist. We've been told for decades, over and over, there's nothing to it. It's not a threat. You can go about your business. And then when FOIA becomes the law of the land, thousands of pages to the contrary leak out. There's a memo by General Nathan Twining in 1947 when the country was being overflown by dozens of UFOs, hundreds of UFOs, in which he said, look, this is not visionary or fictitious, it's real. These things are craft. They're not ours. They outperform anything we've got. I mean, if you follow the paper trail of documents that they wrote before the military got wise and realized that FOIA really exists and changed their tune and not put things in writing, it spells it out pretty clearly. I'll go refer back to Russia. One incident I did not mention to Representative Burleson is Colonel Sokolov in that Ministry of Defense program said there were 40 incidents where Russian warplanes were sent to intercept UFOs. And they were ordered to fire on them. And for the most part, the UFOs would zip away. 3 of the pilots, though, did fire at these things. Those 3 planes stalled out, crashed. 2 of those pilots died. And after that, the Russians changed the standing order. If you see a UFO, leave them alone. No country in the world wants to say and admit that these objects are flying around in our airspace and there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, who wants to say that? The U.S. certainly doesn't, and the Russians didn't either.
Knowing you testified to Arrow, are they obfuscating when they claim to have discovered no evidence of extraterrestrial beings, activity, or technology, and are they lying to the American public? Getting edgy.
It's splitting hairs. No proof that they're extraterrestrials. What would that proof look like? A piece of kryptonite? What would it be? I mean, we could be talking about different forms of non-human intelligence. I think the dominant paradigm is that they come from outer space, somewhere else, and they have some way that they can cross those vast distances that we can't even imagine doing. But that's not necessarily the answer. So asking for proof of extraterrestrials might not be the answer at all. It's splitting hairs. We don't know where they're from. I don't know anyone who knows the answer for sure. They call them aliens just as a placekeeper kind of a word, but no one in all these programs who've studied this stuff for years, people with much bigger brains than mine, knows the answer for sure.
I've talked to Navy folks that some of the deep sea areas, they think there might be something there that they're here, and I don't know when they got here. Another point that needs to be made is every time, we say we're going to back engineer or whatever you want to call it, these craft, I always say, like, it'd be like if you took I ride motorcycles, but if you took like an Indian or a Harley to the people that came over here on the Mayflower, they'd see a bright, shiny object. They might polish it. They might get it started. I doubt they could. They couldn't work on it. They couldn't put fuel. They wouldn't be able to have the capability of putting fuel in it. I just think that's we're scratching at something that we don't have any knowledge of, and that's why it's just taken so dadgum long. But they do know, the first one that cracks that code, it's over. I mean, it's energy, it's power, it's everything. And I worry too that in the wrong hands that they do that, they keep it from the rest of us because they're so invested in whatever energy sources we have here that their billionaire buddies are going to profit, and they can't retool because they know once it's out on the internet, it's over. And so I think there's a lot of things going after, and I think that's why the move to discredit folks is so rapid too. I think they point to them and they put the dogs on them, and it disgusts me.
There's a price to be paid for that too. The Russians and Chinese are trying to figure this out as well, but they don't have the same kind of stigma. They tell their best scientists and engineers, get in there and work on it. And they've been doing it for a very long time, might have a head start on us. Here, we don't have our best scientists and engineers working on it because they've been told it's nonsense. The stigma is very real for people like that.